I hope you can hear me now. Okay, do you hear me now? I hope now it's working. So good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to speak to you today. Thank you, Krista, for introduction and the session and also my speech. I will start, from the first remark that I will not able to tell you about the results of these studies today. So not studies are still continuing, but we will explain this in my presentations, because the focus will be on activities, and of course the studies will be shortly also presented. So how we started this journey? I think it's important to see the problem in the wider context of the pharmaceutical strategy for Europe, which was published just a few months ago, end of November last year, when a number of issues are under attack. We starting also from lessons learned from Kovit, already mentioned by our chair. At the same time, we have a number of actions that together 55 actions, including, of course, legislative proposal there in the pipeline. On security of supply, this is one of the pillars of the strategy. There are two major aspects which I'm going to focus: preventing and mitigation of shortages and assuring the EU resilience and open strategic autonomy. So when you go to the propose activities under this strategy, which of course takes time. We started this journey. This journey is built on a number of experience and reports and observations during last years. So when you go to the boxes of our activity, on one hand, we like to work on secure the supply, revise the legislation to assure the security of supply and other shortages. I will speak a bit about structured dialogue we launched a few weeks ago, and of course increase the transparency of industry in the system. But there are other important areas of our work that are here. So when we go to the pharma strategy, of course, in the best scenario, we should look for the systemic solution, and the systemic solution is in one hand, we should create a regulatory environment assuring the security of supplies, but also we should see what are the other activities around to mitigate and preventing shortages. So our plan is to revise the if needed, and I think it's most probably needed, strategic the pharma legislation, which will help with achieve the goals. And this is why we trigger last year the study on the cause of shortages, and the study will be concluded in the third quarter of this year. Because we like also, of course, engage with all partners, member states, industry, and all they can help us with understanding better, like health professionals, pharmacists, and so on. So when we go to the study, so what are the goal of this study? We put them in the three different fields. So first, we like to do overview of shortages in the EU, including the specific characteristics of those shortages. We like to make sure that we were able to gather as much evidence-based data and information according to the rules of better regulation, which means that we like to keep dialogue and open dialogue and try to gather this evidence from everybody, as everybody said. And of course, next we look for the solution, because when we identify problems, we have to look for the solutions. So the studies where we are. So what is done so far? We complete the stakeholder surveys, literature review, and shortages definition analysis is also where we are for debate, but I think we have already good definition established by working group on this issue. But let's have a look on other aspects. We like to understand, and we did already analysis of product shortages, and now we are in the moment of evaluation of legal framework and look for the potential solution. But then, last step in this work, this is exactly what will give us hopefully some answers to the problem. So the contractor will organize the focus group, checking option for solutions with stakeholders' involvement. So next weeks it will already start. We hope to have the workshop which will allow to put together all aspects and ideas for the solution, and finally the report will be published and will give Commission hopefully more evidence and ideas for our next steps. But what is also important, because our chair already said that this issue, this phenomena, is highly also not only on the citizens, patients, healthcare providers agenda, member state agenda, but also is quite high on the political agenda. Just give you an example. There are conclusions from European Council meeting 2nd of October, when our leaders defined the issue of strategic dependency, particularly in most sensitive ecosystem, such as food health, as a problem that we have to look for the solution as EU, as Europe. So for us, this also gives strong mandate to start structured dialogue with industry partners, patients, and healthcare professional representatives. And this dialogue started end of February. So what is this dialogue about? I think you will hear more from my colleagues later today or tomorrow. So first, the purpose is to strengthen the resilience of the pharma supply chain and assure the security of supply of medicines. So in the first phase, we are now, we gained a better understanding of functioning of a global market and dependency of our system and looking for those main areas of concern. But also we like to understand better the drivers and the potential affordability of the system, because I think this is important for all parties to be engaged, and this is, I think, this initiative is about. But finally, in the second phase, we like to put forward a set of possible measures and formulate policy which help us with to find the good solutions and clear solution for Europe. So this is all for now. I'm ready for a Q&A part, but give floor back to our chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, André, for this interesting presentation. And yes, of course, we are so much looking forward to work together to elaborate measures in order to have a more resilience in the supply chain and improve the situation of availability of medicinal products. We will have the possibility then after all the presentation to discuss with you in more detail. Thank you very much again. And now I would like to invite Nuno Simões from the Infarmed, the Portuguese National Competent Authority, for its presentation on the topic availability of medicinal products. And Nuno will focus on the management of shortages at the level of a national competent authority, as well as on national and EU initiatives that may strengthen the resilience of the supply chain and mitigate the impact on shortages on a patient's health. Nuno, the floor is yours, and I hope we won't have technical problems. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I would like to, first of all, to start by complimenting you and my panel colleagues and make best wishes that all participants have a fruitful conference in these 2 days. So my name is Nuno Simões and I am responsible for a unit which was set up by Infarmed last year to manage availability issues. Today I will focus my presentation on some of the key actions we have been taken to address availability issues. So medicines shortages are a major concern today globally, but availability issues are not a new issue on EU and national agendas. And according with the guidance on detection and notification of shortages of medicinal products, which was agreed by HMA and EMA in 2019, a shortage of medicinal product occurs when supply does not meet demand at national level. Shortages have increasing numbers today. They compromise patient health and put at risk the sustainability of health systems. Shortages also affect particularly older and low price and widely used products. And the reasons of shortages are various. They include manufacturing and quality problems, scarcity of active pharmaceutical ingredients and raw materials, unexpected increase of demand, logistical problems that cause very often delays in supply, parallel trade, non-compliance of legal responsibilities, commercial strategies, pricing and reimbursement legislation as well. So nevertheless, it's always important to distinguish shortages that are caused by safety, quality and efficacy or supply chain problems from those that result from commercial reasons or that result from pricing and reimbursement decisions, which in these cases normally political or regulatory decisions may be necessary. And apart from shortages, national competent authorities and also patients, of course, have to face with other problems like marketing cessations and revocations, which mainly affect important products, normally of lower consumption. And our national legislation is clear regarding the responsibilities of marketing authorization holders, wholesalers, and pharmacies in order to ensure the continuity of supply. These responsibilities are mainly to ensure the adequate, regular, and continuous market supply, the early notification of shortages 2 months in advance, the hold of permanently 2 months minimum safety stocks, the maintenance of up-to-date shortage prevention plans by marketing authorization holders, the development of risk management strategies to prevent shortages, and also to avoid any discriminatory practices when supplying the market. And the fulfillment of these responsibilities is important. It is extremely important for national competent authorities. Early notification and safety stocks are essential instruments for competent authorities to have time to manage the problem and mitigate its impact. And non-compliance faces penalties according to our national law, of course. These responsibilities are ensured to protect patients' health and make sure they get access to the medicines they need. So the increasing number of shortages led to global awareness regarding availability problems in the last years. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, European countries witnessed increased pressure and difficulties with ICU medicines. The pharmaceutical manufacturing and supply chains are complex. They are increasingly globalized and often not sufficiently diversified. And supply chains need to be resilient, reliable, and responsive in order to better detect and respond to patient needs and public health crises. So concerns were growing on the resilience of supply chains, and therefore the European Parliament and Member States have called the European Commission to address the issue as well at European level. And so the European, as has been said, the European Commission has been put forward the pharmaceutical strategy for Europe, and under this context there is ongoing work involving European Commission, Member States and all stakeholders to identify the long-term drivers and root causes of dependencies and vulnerabilities of our supply chains that affect our strategic autonomy. Based on the strategy, the Commission launched the Structured Dialogue Initiative in February, gathering all interested stakeholders, where a strong commitment from all parties was laid out to work in partnership and address aspects affecting the resilience of the supply chain, of the pharmaceutical supply chain. What are the drivers of vulnerabilities? How to make supply chains more secure and diverse? Are the critical medicines? What are the critical medicines, and how can we improve crisis preparedness? And these are some of the questions the structured dialogue will try to answer. As we just heard, the Commission is also preparing a comprehensive study on reasons of shortages at EU level, and we will remain extremely interested in having access to the final conclusions. Additionally, has been already pointed out by various speakers today, a legal proposal to reinforce the mandate of the European Medicines Agency in crisis preparedness and the management of shortages of medicinal products and medical devices is under discussion. So the problems associated with the availability of medicinal products and the vulnerabilities of supply chains demand for a joint effort from all stakeholders to address the problem and to better understand the vulnerabilities of supply chains. The need to deepen the sharing of information between national competent authorities on the reasons of shortages, especially those with high public health impact. Also important for the daily management of availability issues is the development of good communication with stakeholders, based on mutual trust, openness, and responsibility towards the development of true partnerships. It is important to change the mindset and adopt proactive approaches that can prevent future risks, like identifying products with higher vulnerability and engage with marketing authorization holders and manufacturers to seek for long-term solutions, and also try to promote multiple sourcing when it comes to manufacturing. Due to difficulties faced by national competent authorities in verifying the causes of shortages with manufacturing problems, it would be also important to promote a stronger cooperation between inspectorates for the undertaking of inspections of manufacturers. This is a matter still under discussion at EU level. Also important is to make sure that national competent authorities make their job and make a critical analysis on the regulatory framework together with stakeholders and identify areas of improvement that can help medicinal products to stay longer on the market. Regulatory simplification and flexibility is an area of permanent discussion, and which the COVID-19 pandemic led to some simplification and flexibility measures which can be further explored for the future. Regulatory flexibility is particularly important when it comes to availability of medicinal products in the case of introducing a second manufacturer, for example. Transparency is also very important. It must have a clear purpose and should focus on the whole supply chain, from manufacturer to the patient, particularly with regard to the active pharmaceutical ingredients sourced from third countries. The need for more digitalization, for example, when it comes to make better use of the information contained in the marketing authorization dossier, to make more information available on existing stocks from marketing authorization holders, wholesalers, and also hospitals. Situation that can help in crisis situation as we faced during the recent pandemic waves. And also, digitalization can support the identification of situations of excessive consolidation in the supply chains. So last year, Infarmed established a dedicated unit for the management of availability issues. And the creation of this unit mainly followed an integrated approach, combining the management of availability issues with competence for the evaluation of regulatory instruments that can help mitigating shortages, such as exceptional authorizations, import authorizations, and export controls. But it also established a close link between this unit and the National Commission of Pharmacy and Therapeutics, which is a key element in providing clinical guidance regarding therapeutic alternatives. And the key objectives of this unit are clear and twofold, mainly to safeguard patient needs, making sure they have access to the medicines they need, and also to contribute to the adequate, regular, and continuous market supply. So in the last months, we have been engaged with stakeholders in discussing problems in a collaborative way, seeking for solutions together. We have developed new communication tools for stakeholders with guidance on shortage management, improved the shortage reporting system at national level, and published medicinal products shortage lists with mitigation measures and marketing cessation lists. We have also identified products with higher risk of vulnerability and engaged with manufacturers, national manufacturers, seeking for their interest in marketing and manufacturing some of these products. We are actively participating in the SPOT network, which is a network of points of contact of national regulatory agencies to share information on shortages and availability issues. And we have been sharing information with our European partners. We have also currently revising the national regulation of exceptional authorizations in order to simplify the process at national level. And with the assistance of the National Commission of Pharmacy and Therapeutics, we are providing healthcare professionals and patients with more information on a better use of medicines in case of shortages. And finally, we have also revised the regulation to control medicinal products exports with higher risks of shortages in accordance with EU and national rules. To conclude, Madam Chair, allow me to just point out some of the key messages we consider relevant to address availability issues. So there is an important need to better understanding of the supply chain vulnerabilities and dependencies, a work that is being involved, is ongoing at national level, at European level, and with the involvement of all parties. So we are eager to get involved and participate and get to know these conclusions. The need for a strong engagement with all stakeholders based on communication and on openness and responsibility in order to set up a working true partnership with all stakeholders. This is availability is a problem that it can only be solved with the collaboration of all stakeholders in a collaborative manner. To deepen the information sharing between public authorities, particularly on shortages affecting various countries, investigating and inspecting the causes of manufacturing problems, which we consider a matter of importance, and the development of new regulatory tools, and hold a permanent review on those in place, ensuring they are up to date and they foster swift procedures. And finally, to promote better information to healthcare professionals and patients on shortages, ensure transparency and good and open communication tools that will allow the flow of information between all concerned parties. And thank you, and I will be happy to take any questions at the end. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Nuno, for this very interesting presentation. It was very interesting to listen to your initiative at national level, and I'm sure we will have a lot of questions in this relation. And now, last but not least, I'm asking Noël Vation, the Deputy Director of the European Medicines Agency, to address the theme, a common understanding for a list of critical medicines and medical devices. And based on the COVID-19 experience and the recent discussion on this topic at EU level, it is important to hear the EMA's lessons learned from the pandemic regarding this topic and perspective towards the elaboration of a creation of a list of critical medicines and medical devices. So please, Noël, the floor is yours. We are looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Krista. I would like first to congratulate the Portuguese presidency for taking this important initiative, and I'm very grateful that I'm able in order to contribute to today's conference. So what I would like to address today, first start with some background information, then how does the EU manage shortages, the EU response to shortages during the COVID-19 pandemic, the list of critical medicines developed by the steering group in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, the ISPOC system, the ad hoc working group on forecasting demand data, the COVID-19 health response package, with the proposal for a reinforced EMA role, and then some conclusions. And I will be doing that in 15 minutes. I do hope so. So some background information first. Shortages of medicines, as already highlighted by the previous speakers, is a very important problem. It is a global problem. It's on the rise in Europe. And this was also highlighted by the previous speakers. The causes are varied. You have manufacturer or quality-related problems, economical, due to marketing reimbursement decisions, and some other aspects, as was already referred to. There is a significant impact on patients and healthcare systems due to medicines rationing, delay of critical treatments, and use of alternatives, if one can find alternatives, of course. And if you can find alternatives, you still may have the problem that they may be less efficacious, or that they may increase the risk of medication errors in some instances, but also lead to important adverse events, or more important adverse events than with the original product. So how does the EU manage shortages? It's fair to say that improving the availability of medicines authorized in the EU has been a key priority over the past years for all European medicines regulatory agencies for both products, purely nationally authorized products, or products that have been authorized through the centralized procedure. It's also fair to say that in the EU, medicine shortages are mainly dealt with at national level by the national competent authorities, and EMA, before the pandemic started, was primarily involved in, let's say, more quality defects, manufacturing problems with centrally authorized products, which had to be discussed at the level of our scientific committee, the CHMP, and where then also occasionally advice was given to healthcare professionals, or where efforts were being made in order to look for alternative treatments. Regulatory authorities within and outside Europe are increasingly working together to prevent shortages and to limit their impact whenever they occur. And an important initiative was taken in December 2016 when a joint HMA-EMA task force on the availability of authorized medicines for both human and veterinary use was established to provide strategic support and advice to tackle disruptions in supply of human and veterinary medicines and to ensure continued availability. This task force is co-chaired by Christine Rautsep, the head of the Estonian agency, and by myself. Now, turning now to the more specific issue about shortages during the COVID-19 pandemic and what the EU response has been. In the context of this pandemic, EMA, in fact, was asked to go beyond its legal remit, because the Commission, the European Commission, and the Member States asked EMA to increase involvement in the handling of medicine shortages, and a number of activities were initiated. First of all, we set up the so-called EU Executive Steering Group, ESG, on shortages of medicines caused by major events, and of course, the current pandemic is a major event. We also established, in cooperation with the European Commission, HMA and CMDH, a list of critical medicines for use in COVID-19 patients, and I'll come back to that in the next slides. We developed together, so with the Commission and the Member States, so-called regulatory flexibilities, which would help in order to address shortages, possible shortages of medicines. For instance, the ECMP, the Exceptional Change Management Process, GMP, GDP provisions, labeling, packaging requirements for pharmaceutical companies to prevent or mitigate shortages. And this was adopted by the steering group, and it was, and of course, you will find these regulatory flexibilities have been published on our websites. We then launched the ICEBOX system, the single point of contact system for pharmaceutical industry, in April 2020 in relation to COVID-19 medicines in ECU setting. I will also come back to that. And the final initiative that we took was that together with the Member States, we saw the need, taking into account lessons learned from the first wave of the pandemic and to prepare for a second wave, to improve the forecasting of demand of medicines used primarily in intensive care units for COVID-19 patients, and how to better match the estimated demand with the available data. We established an ad hoc working group co-chaired by EMA and a Member State representative in order to undertake work in this respect, and I'll come back to that as well. Important perhaps also to mention that when we established the joint EMA HMA task force on availability of medicines, we looked into several activities such as establishing guidance, templates for reporting, as Nuno was also referring to a definition of what we consider shortage of medicine. But perhaps most importantly, we developed an EU spoke network. This is a single point of contact network for sharing information between member states, the European Commission, and EMA on critical medicine shortages. That was already done before COVID-19, and of course, we use the experience learned in order to further develop that in the context of COVID-19. Going now to the list of critical medicines developed by the steering group in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we saw the need in order to do that, because certainly during the first wave, this was one of the aspects where it was quite unclear what the situation was at the European level, and there was a need, certainly if you wanted to take some common approaches, such as, for instance, regulatory flexibilities that I was referring to, that we had at least information about what type of medicines are we talking about, and what type of medicines, and for what type of medicines can we try to do something. So we consulted the member states, we collected information on medicines used in the management of COVID-19 patients, both symptomatic or antiviral, as well as medicines used for primary care hospital functioning for COVID-19 patients. We didn't start from scratch. We looked at the WHO list of priority medicines. That was used as a starting point, and then we added the information which was coming up from the member states. Of course, we had a huge list because member states, there's no harmonization in terms of what member states will use. There will be common products that are being used, but it will also depend on how healthcare is being organized and what member states will use, taking into account availability of medicines at their level in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. But it allowed us to develop a list of critical medicines at risk of shortage due to increase in demand for COVID-19 patients. And that list was then established by the steering group. The list was subsequently used. We came up with a list of some 131 active substances. And that list was then subsequently used to select a subset of high impact COVID-19 medicines. These were some 31 active substances, where we asked pharmaceutical industry to start reporting on that. So this is what I'm trying to explain here, is that it's important to say that when we established this iSpoke system, we did it in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it is foreseen in order to do that on a basis, on a kind of a temporary basis. We then will have to see what are the lessons learned and how can we further improve. What we ask industry for the 31 medicines is that they report to us current or anticipated supply disruptions of these critical medicines used for COVID-19 patients, both for centrally authorized products and for nationally authorized products. In parallel to the reporting by industry to ourselves, there continues to be the reporting to the national competent authorities. So there is no gap in terms of information which is being shared. To give you an idea about how many companies we are talking about, the 31 substances refer to 450 pharmaceutical companies, of which we have regular reports by some 45 companies. It doesn't mean that the others are not willing to report. It also depends if they anticipate particular shortages. We should also mention that this is a non-mandatory reporting, but what we heard from industry is that there is a positive engagement in order to do so. It has then allowed us to monitor any first of all, to have an oversight of the shortages, and then subsequently to monitoring any particular patterns that we see developing. And if you look at the right-hand side of this slide, you see how it works. So each marketing authorization holder appoints a dedicated person. That person reports to EMA and the NCAs all current or anticipated shortages for these 31 products. EMA compiles the information received. The report is shared with the steering group, and then a decision is taken. Should we take any additional measures? Do we need to introduce additional regulatory flexibility? And then as a result, if that is agreed upon, we update the guidance document for pharmaceutical industry. It's also important to emphasize that the process has been automated as much as possible. It involves the use of robots to send a template for notification of shortages to individual marketing authorization holders and to collect and compile the responses from marketing authorization holders in a single file. The information is subsequently aggregated and then further analyzed. This is now a flow chart on how it works. So if you have an ISPOC person which says, I have to notify a particular shortage for one of those 31, the ISPOC person will do so, will report to EMA and the national competent authorities. We pass the information back through the EU SPOC network, and then member states will have a look, okay, there is a critical shortage anticipated by the pharmaceutical company, but is that also a critical shortage for us as a member state concerned? What is the therapeutic indication? Do we have therapeutic alternatives, etc.? And then the member state will report to the EMA only in case of a critical shortage. So there is this kind of flowchart from industry to EMA, from EMA to the member states, from the member states back to the EMA in terms of critical shortage, and then it is discussed at the level of the EU Executive Steering Group if a particular action should be taken. The ad hoc working group now on forecasting demand data. As I said, this is a common framework for forecasting demand data in the EU. So the aim is to develop methods for the collection and sharing of data on demand for medicines across the EU. We have to take into account that not all the member states have a system or a sophisticated system in place in terms of forecasting demand data. And the aim is really, can member states learn from each other? What kind of IT tools are being used by some member states? Can other member states try to make use of the same kind of IT tool? What methodology is being used? So we brought all this together primarily with the aim of establishing some best practice and then see, can we agree on some common elements for a methodology for forecasting demand data? That resulted in a reflection paper, once again, to improve the forecasting of demand data. Then we tested it. So from the set of 31 substances, we used 5 substances, and we asked member states to test this. We got the results back. We had a very good cooperation from member states concerned. In fact, almost all member states did that particular testing, reported the outcome to us. We have now made changes to the reflection paper, taken into account lessons learned, and the next phase will be for the steering group to hopefully adopt that reflection paper so that we can publish it. Now, it was already referred to by some colleagues about the reinforced EMA role in terms of or in the context of the COVID-19 health response package. So indeed, in that proposal, what is being proposed is that taking into account lessons learned, taking into account systems and structures that have been put in place, I would say on a voluntary basis, as I mentioned, requested by the European Commission and by the member states. I refer to the EU SPOC system, the ISPOC system, the Executive Steering Group, to formalize all this now, and then to see how can we further develop that. So one of the aspects is also the management of critical supply shortages, not only for medicines, but also for medical devices. Now, for medicines, we have gained experience, as I have mentioned to you before. We will be building on the achievements during the COVID-19. But the medical devices is something that the EMA has never been confronted with. So we have to get acquainted in a very short time frame with the field of medical devices. We had very little exposure, and coming back then to the steering group, that will then be transformed in the medicine steering group, and an equivalent will be established in the field of the medical device sector, so the medical devices steering group, which will both have to look as well at these critical medicines and the critical medical devices. Coming now to my conclusions. So since 2016, the task force have looked at availability issues, including supply chain disruption, to improve continuity of supply for both human and veterinary medicines. In the context of the pandemic, we have taken a greater role as EMA in the handling of shortages, despite the absence of a clear legal mandate, but it has allowed us to gain experience and to use that experience in order to translate that in what is expected to be a reinforced role of the EMA in shortage management for medicines, and then for medical devices. We'll have to see what can we use from your experience with medicines, what can we also translate to the medical device sector, acknowledging, of course, that it is a completely new field. The new legislative proposal puts clear obligations to companies and to member states for reporting on shortages, supply capacity, and demand data to the agency, which will facilitate setting recommendations and coordination of measures to prevent or mitigate potential or actual shortages. And so with that, Madam Chair, I hand back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Noel, for this interesting presentation. And I would like to thank all the speakers for their excellent presentations on the topic availability of medicinal product, looked from different point of views. And yes, I invite now all of you to participate in the discussion. And I have seen already 2 questions in the chat. The first question is directed to Nuno, and it concerns the stockpiling. The question is, could national stockpiling measures lead to additional costs that will make low price, low volume medicines even less available in Europe, or at least in some member states? Nuno, please. What is your recommendation in this direction? What do you expect?
Well, I don't think it could. Thank you first of all for the question. I don't think it would increase costs. At least it's not how we see it. First of all, this is a responsibility which is very clear in our national legislation. And in the case for the wholesalers to stockpile, for example, they have what is written on legislation is about, they should have in terms of stockpile, they should have like 1 month of average of the past 12 months plus 50%, which means it's a bit less than 2 months stockpiling. It's about 1.5 months, but we don't think it could lead to costs increase. We think that it's very much about the development of risk management strategies, about good planning in order to prevent risks and to prevent shortages in the medium term. At least we don't have, even from our experience, that feedback from stakeholders.
Thank you very much, Nuno, for this answer. And I would also like to refer to your presentation where you mentioned that digitalization would help us to have more transparency about available stocks. where they are available at the level of the manufacturer, wholesaler, or at the level of the pharmacies. And I also would say that, yes, we have realized that the marketing authorization holder are manufacturing the medicinal product on demand and not really investing in stockpiling. But I think something has to be done. And perhaps there is also a legal provision necessary. And perhaps then a question to you, Andre, can you imagine that we will revise and update the pharmaceutical legislation in order to include also a provision of mandatory stockpiling? Because I was reading a study that stockpiling for medicinal products for about 5 months would decrease the shortage problem by 85%. So what is your view on that, Andre?
No, thank you, Chris. It's of course, it's always double side sword, question. So in one hand, shortages will stabilize, I think, the supply. But of course, the other problem is that we cannot prevent ever shortages, most probably with this approach, because the lessons learned, for example, now from the crisis is that, of course, the consumption of some medicines, like the ICU case, which Noel explained, was exploding. And really, no one was prepared for this. So even having, I think, supply for 1 or 2 or 3 will not most probably help during this type of crisis. The other problem, of course, is the questions of do we like to have something like a joint stockpile, in the sense that this is what may be discussed in the area, for example, of rare antibiotics, because in the old discussion about the new antibiotics, one of the ideas is that they should be available, but at the same time they should be prevented to be overused. So there is a kind of question, is a stockpile a right place, but maybe stockpile should be available to across EU. So and maybe the very last point on this, we also learned that during this crisis that when member states started to block each other, basically started to stockpile on the territory, this fire blanket was too short, to move to other countries they were in need. So this is maybe other critical questions, how much stockpiles are flexible, but I fully agree. We also need to, and there's also big lessons from this crisis. Better IT system and which can be also available across Europe. So this is what Noel said: learning from each other, looking for the availability of data and the tools allowing us exchange of information. And I think everybody, member states, patients, healthcare providers, hospitals will be beneficial.
Yes, thank you. Yes, the key words are transparency and very, very good communication between each other. There's another question in relation to stockpiling and a comment. The question is, do you believe that a mandatory European, a local buffer stock could be a solution? And that is the comment added, stockpiling is quite different from buffer stock. Do you have an additional comment on that, Andre? But I think you addressed already the question on whether there is the
national or
national or European stockpiling. And coming back perhaps to the first question.
So sorry, because I think we also should add, something which was in the presentation, that the flexibility of the regulatory flexibility. I think the crisis also showed that when we introduce flexibility, for example, when the ICU medicine contract or joint procurement was done, we were able to use this to allow nationally authorized medicines to travel better. So this is also I agree with what was presented, that we need, package of measures, because one measure will not work, So this is I think other shortages having many causes. I think the response most probably, okay, I'm not predicting everything, but I think response should be most probably also quite complex and multifactorial somehow.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Can I add, Krista? I think for me, the term stockpiling has a kind of a negative connotation. Perhaps you should try to find a more neutral word than that. But I think what this crisis has learned us is that, of course, you will have to be able to meet increasing demand in a very short period of time. You have a number of, how should I say it, unforeseen circumstances. If you have export restrictions from outside the EU into the EU, or even within the EU, as we have witnessed in the heat of the fight, if I can put it like that. These are elements that we have to take into account. And let's say you would have a major problem in a part of a natural disaster in a part of the world where most of the antibiotics are being produced. What is our response to it? So shouldn't we have a look at the number of different scenarios in order to see if such scenario happens, how can we make sure that patients in the EU can still have, and outside the EU, but I think we should, we have responsibility for inside the EU. How can we make sure that we have enough measures in place in order to try to address the problem in the shortest possible time frame? And it would perhaps be good to look into some scenarios in terms of emerging events and what we can do, taking into account lessons learned from this current pandemic. Over.
Yes, thank you very much. There is another comment from Orden. Will you consider including demands for buffer stock as part of procurement negotiation with the industry? So yes, this is, I think, also a very good proposal. But I would like now to leave the topic stockpiling or buffer stocks, because you are invited to create a new name, because I agree. We need more than only one word. We need more actions and considerations. But to go to the other topic, medical devices. Yes, the topic of our session is availability of medicinal product and medical devices. And of course, we were focusing much more on medicinal product. Noel, you mentioned in, I think, your last slide of your presentation that there is an extended mandate of the EMA, and that in the future, EMA will be also then for some parts responsible for medical devices. And that is the question, is there any observation on medical devices from the speakers? So I would like to ask you, Noel, are there already concrete thoughts on how to manage these additional tasks for the EMA on medical devices?
Yes, that is a very good question, Krista, and a very difficult one to answer. We have to start from scratch. First of all, I think we have to know this is a new area. These are companies with whom we have had no contact whatsoever, perhaps in very specific situations. This is now for a completely different purpose. So we have to know this particular field, the particular operators in that field, the persons. We have to establish lists of contacts. We have to bring into a complete picture of whom we have to interact with, and then establish those particular channels, create this kind of overview, then start looking into, are we going to use the same kind of mechanism? Will we do something completely different? We should not forget this is in the context of a crisis situation. So we are talking about what kind of medical devices. And if I look at the beginning where we were talking about ventilators, and now we're looking primarily into syringes, so you also have this kind of moving target. So you start with something and you may be able to solve that problem, and then you have to move into another one. So we are indeed looking into it. We have limited period of time because once legislation is adopted, I think the implementation period is extremely short, perhaps unrealistic short, if I can use it that in that way. But a lot of thought still has to go into it. We don't have any advice or any viewpoints readily available at this moment. It's really a major undertaking for us.
Thank you, Noel, for these insights. So, as you mentioned, yes, we are looking on the specific shortage. I can mention as an example, COVID-19 vaccines. Yeah, very important for all of us currently, and we are get the vaccines, and all the vaccines are in multi-dose vials at the moment. And then the next question is, do we have all the needles with low dead volume needles? And the other question I just recently heard is the glass vials for the vaccines, and they are produced in India, and the question is whether there will be then a problem in getting these glass vials. So are we running into another shortage because of these containers? Can I ask you, Nuno, at national level, have you realized now, especially during the pandemic crisis, shortages with medical devices, and if yes, which kind of medical devices?
According to my knowledge, the information available, we haven't been facing serious shortages of medical devices. In the first wave, there was regarding some of the issues like gloves, latex gloves, where the manufacturing is coming from third countries. But suddenly the production of masks at national level also has faced a sudden increase with the adaptation of some of the tissuing manufacturing in Portugal that adapted their production to these products. And at least in syringes, we have been having some issues, but it's been responding to the current needs till the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. And Noel, yes, you mentioned that all the contact persons have to be identified, and I'm also thinking on the whole network of the notified bodies, which is a total new, more or less, network. And the system of authorization of these medical devices, this is different. The responsibility of the authorities is different. Yes, and I would like to ask you, André, because the medical devices moved again to DG Health. I'm very happy about that, because it was not a good situation that they are located in two different DGs. And yes, what is your view, and how are you now managing that medical devices is also in your DG, and what will be the future of cooperation?
It's very interesting. It was moved to us, just a few weeks before the crisis started. So I think it was also interesting. But Anna, my colleague, head of unit responsible, she was more about the way the implementation of the MDR is going on better. But I think I would like maybe respond to this question of how we came to this idea to invite EMA to take care of this new problem, because it's again the problem came out of this crisis. That we learn how to work with medicines. At the same time, member states and Commission, we understood that we have to have place a more kind of professional approach in the case of a crisis in the medical devices. We should not also forget that when we say medical devices, it's also IVD, and the whole story about the tests and availability, good quality tests during the crisis was also big issue. So we are not only speaking about the questions, what is available, but if the quality of those products is also good for this is a complex system we have in Europe. We are not changing system because we have notified bodies in the system. We have, of course, role of member states, but we hope the cooperation between the member states agency, which most of them, they have already responsive for the medical devices field, of course, still building up because, many investment is going on also in this field. Role of EMA, which is also somehow started to be the professional fireman, if I may say, Noel, I think it's most probably I should give you this fireman, toys too, that you use them as showing the preparedness and also knowledge in this how to do it. But of course, the big questions is, again, the data availability of the system. We are building UDAMED system, which again is under development. So we need also time to get all IT tools in place. So for sure, this will be time to get fully prepared, but at the same time, I don't think we have many options left. We learn things, and we really have to employ, lessons learned us up, because this crisis is continuing. Whatever we believe is still we're in the crisis. Secondly, we have to be ready for the next, because unfortunately, the situation may turn upside down so quick.
Yes, thank you very much, Andre. And I think you mentioned the very, very important issue. This is the quality of the medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. And we are all faced now in the situation of the quality of the different antigen tests. And I think, we have to improve the cooperation and communication between the member states, also to have more exchange on what is going on in the member states, who is proving the quality. We should not duplicate the work that all the member states are testing the same tests. Yeah, we should have a more centralized approach on that and communicating what are the outcomes of the tests and of these the analytical tests by member states of the in vitro diagnostics. So I think it has to go in a direction where we have more centralized information and group the results gained by the member states, so that we really can improve the system in total. We are more or less reaching the end of the session. 2 minutes to go. I can't see further questions in the chat. Perhaps I have a last question to you, Noel. You mentioned the list of critical substances. So 31 active substances have been identified to be critical. I know that there is the identification of criteria now in general for critical substances. So what is your opinion? Will we have different list of critical substances according to the situation? Will there be a permanent list like the WHO list of essential substances? So what do you think, Noel?
I think you can easily identify a list of substances which can be common, irrespective where you will say these are, can I call it more strategic medicines that you always need to have available, and then on top of that, probably depending on the crisis situation, depending on the event. Let's say you fall without antibiotics, to give an example. So what would you do? It is not the same as the current COVID-19 crisis. So I would perhaps see it more as a kind of a list of essential, and then depending on the crisis situation, then add to that particular list. And if you allow me, Krista, I would like to add one additional point. I think if we have to manage expectations, as we as regulators always have to do. But the success of whatever we will be putting in place will not be limited to sharing of information and then establishing like an overview of all that information. The new legislation should allow us to do something with that information and to address the problem. I think that is going to be one perhaps of the more difficult exercises. So if we have a complete overview what the issue is, what is affected, who is affected, what can we then do about it? And I think there needs to be, it is not only a matter of A, you also have B. B is you have the problem, you have identified the scope, and what are we going to do about it now? It would be a pity if we stay at the first phase and say we've done our job, we have shared information, this is the overview, and that is it. That is not sufficient. And I think the general public will be disappointed if that would be the outcome of the exercise. Over.
Thank you very much, Noel, for these views. And yes, very, very important. And this identification, there is a lot to do in the future to really solve the problem. Perhaps last word, Nuno, do you have also ideas for the future, and do you want to mention a very, very important point for you personally, which has to be discussed in this relation?
Well, as I mentioned in my presentation, I think one of the key aspects is to work collaboratively in this topic. I think no one of the sides has all of the solutions, and we need to, as you pointed out, have good communication with industry and all sides of industry, and also patients and healthcare professionals. This are some of the topics we have been working on the list the last year, so to saying, and I think the feedback is positive, and we are perfectly aware that industry is ultimately always responsible for supplying the market. We are just another instrument that can help. In some points, we are needed to mitigate the problems and defend or safeguard the patient's rights. And I think somehow there is a trust, a mutual trust that we feel from the other side is having some results, which we think is positive. Regarding the critical medicines list, I think, well, it's an important issue. We are being involved in discussions at EU level, and also for national competent authorities to develop their own plans. Having, well, if we have an agreed EU critical medicines list, is important for national competent authorities also to deal with these situations, and also relate with marketing authorization holders and wholesalers, and at least secure some of those products in a more clearer way. And of course, transparency. We need to, I think, all sides can do more in terms of transparency, in terms of publication of information, namely stocks, and I think it's possible. I think national competent authorities can give a step forward and put in place IT systems that can interrelate, put in liaison all the sides of the equation in order to have real information up to date that would better make all sides have a better picture on demand and supply.
Thank you very much. Final word to you, Andre.
No, I just can echo, the both interventions from Noel. We need get the tools around us to act. and I think cooperation is the word I think we should leave as the other one. And trust, most probably. We have to also trust each other when we put the tools on the table.
Then thank you very much for this interesting discussion now after your very good presentations. I would like to applaud to you. I would like to thank the audience for their participation. I hope that you have heard a lot of interesting new information in the relation how we can improve the resilience of our supply chain and go in the direction that we have less availability problems in the future. Thank you very much and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.